She never went to prison, not for a single day. Her husband chaired the meeting that formalized the murder of 11 million people. Her estate ran on the broken backs of concentration camp prisoners. Survivors testified under oath that she personally beat them. And when the war ended, she went home, opened an inn, collected a government pension, wrote a book, and died in her bed at 74. I've studied a lot of dark history on this channel, but the story of Lina Heydrich bothers me in a very specific way. Lina von Osten was born on June 14, 1911, on the small Baltic island of Fehmarn in northern Germany. She didn't stumble into Nazism. She didn't inherit it from a domineering father or a manipulative husband. She joined the Nazi Party as a teenager, independently, voluntarily, before Hitler had even consolidated power. Before joining was politically safe or socially rewarded. That is the first thing you need to understand about Lina. She was not a product of circumstance. She was a product of conviction. In December 1930, she attended a ball in Kiel and met a disgraced former naval officer named Reinhard Heydrich. Within 12 days, they were engaged. Now, that alone should tell you something about who both of these people were. Here is something that I think about every time I revisit this story. At the moment Lina met Reinhard, he was already involved with another woman, the daughter of a senior naval official. He was seeing both women at the same time. When the Navy found out, they convened a formal military court of honor. Admiral Erich Raeder dismissed Reinhard Heydrich from the German Navy in April 1931 for conduct unbecoming an officer. His career finished, his income gone, his future completely blank. And this is the moment that changes everything, not just for Reinhard and Lina, but for millions of people who would never know their names. Lina told Reinhard to contact Heinrich Himmler. She had heard Himmler was building an SS intelligence unit. She pushed Reinhard to go to Munich and meet him. Himmler cancelled the appointment. Reinhard showed up anyway. Himmler hired him. Think about what that means in plain terms. A man gets fired for cheating. His fiancée, fully aware he was seeing another woman, doesn't leave him. Instead, she redirects his ambition directly into the heart of the SS. Without that push, without Lina's decision in that specific moment, Reinhard Heydrich almost certainly does not become the head of the Gestapo. He does not chair the Wannsee Conference. The administrative machinery of the final solution looks different, possibly slower, possibly less organized. I'm not saying Lina Heydrich caused the Holocaust, but I am saying that her choices had consequences that extended far beyond her own life. And that is something the historical record forces us to sit with. They married in 1931. Over the following decade, Reinhard became one of the most powerful men in Nazi Germany. By the late 1930s, Lina was living in a confiscated 32-room estate, the Panenské Břežany villa outside Prague, given to her family after Reinhard was appointed acting Reich protector of Bohemia and Moravia. In her own memoir, she described this period almost warmly, comfortable, like a life she had earned. But here is what was happening behind that comfort. Reinhard's close associate, Walter Schellenberg, who later testified at Nuremberg, described Heydrich's one personal weakness as his, quote, ungovernable sexual appetite to which he would surrender without inhibition or caution. Heydrich had multiple documented affairs during the marriage. Lina knew. She referenced it in her own writings. Now, my honest read of this, based on everything documented about her character. Lina Heydrich was not a woman who tolerated humiliation quietly. She was sharp, politically educated, and deeply proud. The affairs were not something she absorbed passively. According to documented accounts, both Reinhard and Lina had extramarital relationships during the marriage. What does that tell us? It tells us this was not a devoted, naive wife, unaware of her husband's true nature, This was a woman who was fully inside this world, the ideology, the power, the compromises, and she navigated it on her own terms. She was not Reinhard's victim. She was his equal partner in the system they both chose. On January 20th, 1942, Reinhard Heydrich chaired the Wannsee Conference in a villa on the outskirts of Berlin. 15 senior Nazi officials sat around a table. The surviving Wannsee Protocol, an actual document that exists in archives, records that Heydrich presented the plan to coordinate the murder of approximately 11 million Jews across occupied Europe. The killing was already happening. Wannsee formalized the bureaucratic structure to make it faster, wider, and more coordinated. Reinhard Heydrich organized that meeting. He submitted the protocol to his superiors. And Lina Heydrich's response decades later, when directly asked about the Holocaust, she called it, and this is a direct documented quote, a fairy tale. This is not a woman who was confused or poorly informed. This is a woman who made a deliberate, calculated choice to deny documented historical reality, in public, in print, on record. That is not grief, that is not trauma, that is ideology. On May 27, 1942, Reinhard Heydrich was ambushed in Prague by 2 Czech resistance operatives, Josef Gabčík and Jan Kubiš, trained in Britain under Operation Anthropoid. Gabčík's gun jammed. Kubiš threw a grenade. The blast wasn't immediately fatal, but shrapnel embedded in Heydrich's body, and on June 4, 1942, he died, most likely from sepsis. He was 38 years old. The Nazi reprisals were documented and catastrophic. On June 10, 1942, the village of Lidis was surrounded by SS units. All 173 men and boys over 15 were shot on the spot. Women were sent to Ravensbrück concentration camp. Children were taken. The village was burned and physically demolished. This was done in Reinhard Heydrich's name. Lina was 30 years old, a widow with 4 children. And here is where most people expect the story to end. In grief, in retreat, in survival. Instead, it escalated. After Reinhard's death, Lina remained at the Panenské Břežany estate. She ran it using forced laborers brought from Theresienstadt and Flossenburg concentration camps. This is not speculation. This is documented. Survivors who worked on that estate gave sworn testimony after the war. Multiple witnesses stated that Lina personally struck prisoners, spat on them, and ordered SS guards to administer physical punishment to workers she considered too slow. Here is what troubles me when I look at that testimony. These survivors went through the process of formally reporting what happened to them. They submitted testimony. Investigators recorded it. And then nothing. No trial, no conviction, not a single day of legal accountability for Lina Heydrich. This is not an oversight. This is a pattern. And the pattern tells you something about how post-war Europe handled the women who participated in Nazi crimes, which historically was very, very quietly. After the war, Lina returned to Fehmarn. The Czech government sentenced her to life imprisonment in absentia. She was briefly detained by Allied authorities and released, and then she sued the West German government twice. She demanded a widow's pension as the wife of a high-ranking SS general. The first suit failed. She filed again. In 1959, she won. The West German government, a democratic state, rebuilt partly on the principle of never again, paid a monthly pension to the widow of the man who chaired the Wannsee Conference, funded by German taxpayers. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because it is not a small detail. It is a legal, institutional decision made by a democratic government, and it tells you that the post-war reckoning with Nazi perpetrators and their families was profoundly incomplete. She used that pension income to buy property and open an inn on Fehmarn. The inn reportedly became a gathering place for former SS veterans and unrepentant nationalists. In 1976, Lina published her memoir. She titled it Leben mit einem Kriegsverbrecher, Life with a War Criminal. The title sounds like an admission. It wasn't. The memoir minimized, deflected, and reframed. She described the Wannsee Conference as a routine administrative meeting about resettlement logistics. She portrayed Reinhard as a complex man misrepresented by history. She denied the scale of what his work made possible. Historians who analyzed the text described it as a calculated rehabilitation effort, not a memoir of grief or reflection, but a document designed to reshape historical memory. This was her final contribution to the Nazi project, 40 years after its collapse, still managing its legacy. Lina Heydrich died on August 14, 1985, on the island of Fehmarn. She was 74 years old, never convicted, never tried in person, never forced to account for a single documented act. And here is the honest question this story leaves me with. When we talk about Nazi Germany, we spend most of our time on the men: Hitler, Himmler, Heydrich, the architects, the commanders, the faces. But systems like that do not run on one person. They run on networks of people who believe, who enable, who push, who protect, and who, when it's over, we quietly go home and live long lives. Lina Heydrich joined the Nazi Party before it had power. She pushed her husband into the SS when his career collapsed. She ran a forced labor estate. She denied the Holocaust publicly. She fought a democratic government for a pension and won. She published a memoir designed to protect a war criminal's memory. She was never a passive figure. She was an active one, from the very first page of this story to the very last. History's failure to fully reckon with women like Lina Heydrich isn't just an academic gap. It's a mistake that distorts how we understand what actually made the Third Reich function. And that, more than any single fact in this video, is what I think you should carry with you. That is the real documented story of Lina Heydrich. If this gave you a perspective you hadn't considered before, that's exactly what Darkroom Archive is here for. Subscribe if you're not already, share this with someone who needs to see it, and I'll see you in the next one.